It was the fall of 1974, and she stood on a soundstage in Hollywood, about to deliver one of the most iconic performances in cinema history. The director was Mel Brooks, a comedic genius who had discovered something special in the shy, insecure actress. When the cameras rolled, she transformed into a German cabaret singer with an operatic voice and fearless comedic timing. The scene was electric, legendary. When Brooks yelled cut, he turned to her with tears in his eyes. "You're a star," he said simply. But she didn't believe him. She never believed anyone. Years of abandonment, rejection, and self-doubt have left her convinced she didn't deserve success. She would go on to win a Tony Award, earn 4 Oscar nominations, and perform on the greatest stages in the world. Yet she remained convinced she was a fraud. Then came the cancer diagnosis. Then came the silence. Then came her death at 57, largely forgotten by a world she had made laugh for 40 years. This is her real story. The genius nobody remembers. This is Madeline Kahn. But before we start, I want to know, where are you watching from right now? What time is it for you? Drop a comment and let me know. I read every single one. This is Madeline Kahn. Welcome to her story. Chapter 1. The Broken Beginning. A Child Born into Chaos. Madeline Gail Wolfson was born on September 29th, 1942, in Boston, Massachusetts, to Paula Goldberg and Bernard B. Wolfson. Her parents were high school sweethearts, the kind of young love that seems destined for tragedy. Paula was only 17 years old when she gave birth to Madeline. She was a teenager, still a child herself, suddenly responsible for a baby. Bernard was a garment manufacturer, a man of some means and business acumen, but he was not prepared for the demands of fatherhood. The marriage was unstable from the beginning, marked by tension and conflict, and the fundamental incompatibility of two very different people. When Madeline was not even 2 years old, Bernard left the family. He walked out, abandoning his wife and daughter, shortly after returning from World War II. For Madeline, this meant growing up without a father, something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. But more importantly, it meant growing up with Paula, a woman who was fundamentally self-centered, manipulative, and deeply unhappy with her own life. Paula had dreamed of being an actress. She had visions of herself on the stage, in the spotlight, receiving applause and recognition, but she was not talented enough. She was not beautiful enough. She was not special enough. The entertainment industry had no use for her. So instead of accepting this reality, instead of building a life around something else, Paula spent the rest of her life chasing the dream that had eluded her. And she would try to live that dream through her daughter. When Madeline was 6 years old, Paula made a decision. She enrolled her daughter in the Menument School, a progressive boarding school in Bristol, Pennsylvania. This was not a decision made in the best interest of the child. This was a decision made in the best interest of Paula. She wanted to pursue her acting career. She wanted to move to New York. She wanted to be free from the responsibilities of motherhood. So she sent her daughter away to boarding school, to live with strangers, to grow up surrounded by other children whose parents had also abandoned them. For Madeline, boarding school was devastating. She was a shy child, an insecure child, a child who had already experienced the abandonment of her father. Now she was being abandoned by her mother as well. She spent her formative years away from her family, living in a dormitory, surrounded by other children in similar circumstances. The boarding school was progressive, which meant it encouraged creativity and self-expression. Madeline took advantage of this. She began to act in school productions. She began to sing. She began to find her voice, literally and figuratively, through performance. The stage became her refuge, the place where she could escape the pain and loneliness of her real life. By the time Madeline was old enough to leave boarding school and return to New York, where her mother had moved, she had already discovered the one thing that would define her entire life. She had discovered that she could make people laugh. She had discovered that she could transform herself, that she could become someone else, that she could create characters and inhabit them in a way that felt true and real and alive. The stage was the only place where Madeline Kahn ever felt truly at home. Meanwhile, her mother continued on her destructive path. Paula married a man named Hiller Kahn, who adopted Madeline legally, giving her his last name. But this marriage, like her first, was troubled. Hiller Kahn was a decent man, but Paula was a woman who could not be satisfied. She was a woman who resented her own daughter for not becoming the star that she herself had failed to become. She was a woman who would spend the rest of her life living off her daughter's success, asking her for money, manipulating her, using her. When Madeline returned to New York to live with her mother and stepfather, she attended Martin Van Buren High School in Queens. She was still shy, still insecure, but she had discovered something in boarding school that would sustain her. She had discovered theater. She performed in school productions. She was active in the drama program. She was beginning to build the foundation for a career in entertainment, though at that point she had no idea that this was what she wanted to do with her life. She was not dreaming of stardom. She was not hoping to become famous. She was simply finding a way to survive in a world that had never given her much reason to feel safe or loved. Chapter 2. The Education of an Artist, Hofstra University, and the Discovery of Voice. When Madeline graduated from high school in 1960, she received a drama scholarship to Hofstra University on Long Island. Hofstra was a small liberal arts college with a strong drama program. It was the kind of place where Madeline could continue to develop her skills as a performer, where she could explore her talent in a more serious and structured way. She was 17 years old, still painfully shy, but determined to pursue acting in some form. At Hofstra, Madeline studied drama, music, and speech therapy. This combination of studies is telling. She was training as an actress, but she was also training as a speech therapist. This suggests that she had not fully committed to the idea of a career in entertainment. She was hedging her bets, keeping her options open, maintaining a backup plan in case the dream of acting did not work out. But even as she was studying speech therapy, something was happening to her. She was discovering her voice, quite literally. Madeline had always had a beautiful voice. She had been singing since childhood. But at Hofstra, she began to study voice seriously. She began to understand the technical aspects of singing, the breathing, the control, the way that voice could be used as an instrument of expression. She was developing the operatic soprano voice that would eventually become one of her most distinctive features as a performer. Teachers and fellow students began to notice that there was something special about this shy girl from New York. There was a gap between who she was in real life and who she was when she was performing. The shy, insecure Madeline seemed to disappear when she got on stage. One of her acting teachers, however, gave her a piece of advice that was meant to discourage her. He told her that her voice, the way she spoke, her distinctive way of pronouncing words in a kind of baby talk inflection, would handicap her career as an actress. It would prevent her from getting serious roles. It would limit her opportunities. This comment, meant as criticism, would actually become one of her greatest assets. The way Madeline spoke, the distinctiveness of her voice, the particular quality of her delivery, would eventually become one of the things that made her such a brilliant comedic actress. But at the time, she did not know this. She only knew that a teacher had told her something was wrong with her, and that if she was going to be an actress, she needed to change herself. After graduating from Hofstra in 1964 with a degree in speech therapy, Madeline briefly taught in the public schools. She was using her degree, making a living, doing something practical and respectable. But she was not happy. She knew, even then, that teaching speech therapy was not what she was meant to do. She was meant to perform. She was meant to be on stage. So she left teaching and she began to audition for parts in the theater. She was 22 years old, and she was starting her career as a professional actress. Chapter 3: The Early Struggle Broadway and the Years of Disappointment. When Madeline began auditioning for professional theater roles in New York in the mid-1960s, she was competing against hundreds of other young women who had the same dream as her. New York theater was competitive, brutal, unforgiving. Actresses who had trained at prestigious conservatories and studied with famous coaches often did not get parts. Getting a role in a Broadway show or even in an off-Broadway production was extremely difficult. Madeline struggled for several years, working various jobs to support herself while she went to auditions. She joined Actors Equity, the union that represents stage actors, by working as a chorus girl in a revival of Kiss Me, Kate in 1965. It was not a glamorous role. It was not even a significant role. She was one of many chorus girls, singing and dancing in the background of a classic musical. But it was a start. It was a professional role in a professional production. It was a foot in the door of the entertainment industry. After Kiss Me, Kate, Madeline began to audition for other roles. But success eluded her. She was cast in How Now, Dow Jones, but her part was written out before the show reached Broadway. This was humiliating. It meant that the producers had realized she was not working in the production, that her scenes were not contributing to the show, that she was expendable. She was removed, her scenes cut, and she was no longer a part of the production. This kind of rejection is difficult for any performer, but for someone like Madeline, who was already insecure and self-doubting, it was devastating. Similar things happened with other productions. She was in Promises, another show that never made it to Broadway with her in the cast. She was in various off-Broadway productions that had limited runs and limited audiences. She was struggling, working temporary jobs to pay her rent, auditioning constantly, facing rejection after rejection. Years passed with very little success. By the late 1960s, Madeline was still essentially unknown. She had been trying to make it as a professional actress for several years, and she had very little to show for her efforts. But then, in 1968, something changed. She was cast in Leonard Sillman's New Faces of 1968, a Broadway revue that featured new and emerging talent. It was not a star-making role, but it was a significant opportunity. Madeline performed several numbers in the revue, and she impressed audiences and critics with her comic timing, her distinctive voice, and her ability to inhabit characters. The reviews for New Faces of 1968 were good, and more importantly, the reviews singled out Madeline Kahn for praise. Critics noticed her. Directors noticed her. This was her big break. In the same year, 1968, Madeline was asked to perform in a special concert performance of Leonard Bernstein's operetta Candide, presented in honor of Bernstein's 50th birthday. This was a prestigious opportunity. Bernstein was one of the most important composers of the 20th century, and to be selected to perform in a concert of his music was an honor. Madeline sang the role of Cunegonde, a role that required both comic acting ability and serious vocal talent. She impressed Bernstein and the other participants, and she demonstrated that she was capable of handling sophisticated musical material. Following New Faces of 1968, Madeline appeared in the off-Broadway revue Promenade. Then, in 1970, she had a featured role in Richard Rodgers' musical 2 by 2, which also starred Danny Kaye, the legendary comic actor and singer. In 2 by 2, Madeline had the opportunity to perform an operatic number called The Golden Ram, which concluded with a jaw-dropping high C note. This became one of her signature performances, the kind of thing that people remembered years later. She was demonstrating a range and a sophistication that few comedic actresses possessed. She could be funny, but she could also sing opera. She could play silly characters, but she could also deliver genuine emotion. Chapter 4: The Move to Hollywood a new beginning at 30. By the early 1970s, Madeline had built a respectable career on Broadway and in off-Broadway theater. She had been nominated for a Tony Award for her work in The Boom Boom Room in 1973. She was being recognized by the theater community, but she was still not a star. She was still not making significant money. She was still struggling financially, and she was getting older. She was in her late 20s, approaching her 30s, and she was still essentially unknown outside of the theater world. In 1972, when Madeline was 29 years old, she made a decision that would change her life. She decided to go to Hollywood and pursue a career in film. This was a bold decision. She was not young by Hollywood standards. She was not the type of woman that Hollywood typically made into stars. She was not a stunning beauty. She was distinctive looking, yes, but not in the conventional sense that the entertainment industry valued. She was quirky, funny, a character actress rather than a leading lady. But she was talented, and in 1972, talent mattered enough to get her a role in a major Hollywood film. The film was What's Up, Doc? Directed by Peter Bogdanovich and starring Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal. It was a romantic comedy, a screwball comedy, the kind of film that depended on comedic timing, physical comedy, and the ability to deliver witty dialogue. Madeline played Eunice, the frumpy, neurotic, utterly hilarious fiancée of Ryan O'Neal's character. She was not the lead, not even close. But the role was significant, and it was the kind of role that could make a real impression on audiences. Madeline was terrified. This was her first major film role. She had never made a movie before. She was working with Barbra Streisand, one of the biggest stars in the world. She was working with one of the most important directors in contemporary cinema. Everything about the experience was intimidating. In interviews she gave years later, she talked about being petrified of Streisand, of the fact that everything about filming was new and strange to her. She even said she was petrified of the palm trees in California. But despite her fear, despite her insecurity, she delivered a performance that was absolutely brilliant. She made audiences laugh. She made the critics take notice. And most importantly, she made Peter Bogdanovich want to work with her again. Chapter 5. The Rise, the early 197 OS, and the films that made her a star. Following the success of What's Up, Doc? Madeline's career in Hollywood began to accelerate. In 1973, she appeared in Paper Moon, another film directed by Peter Bogdanovich, this time starring Ryan O'Neal and his real-life daughter Tatum O'Neal. In Paper Moon, Madeline played Trixie Delight, a con artist and dancer in 1930s Kansas. It was a more substantial role than Eunice in What's Up, Doc? And it was a different kind of character. Trixie was a world-weary woman, a woman with a past, a woman who was jaded and calculating, but also somehow sympathetic and vulnerable. Madeline's performance in Paper Moon was extraordinary. She brought depth to what could have been a one-dimensional character. She made Trixie funny, but she also made her human. She was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for this role. She did not win, but the nomination was significant. It meant that the motion picture industry had taken notice of her. It meant that she was no longer just a theater actress trying to make it in Hollywood. She was a real film actress, someone who could handle substantial roles in important films. But it was in 1974 that Madeline achieved true stardom, or at least the kind of stardom that would define her career for the rest of her life. In 1974, she appeared in 2 Mel Brooks films. The first was Blazing Saddles, Brooks' riotous, profane, deliberately offensive satire of Western films. In Blazing Saddles, Madeline played Lily von Stupp, a cabaret singer modeled on Marlene Dietrich's iconic performance in Destry Rides Again. Lily von Stupp is a German saloon singer, sultry and seductive, completely uninhibited, a woman who sings with a thick Germanic accent and performs the number Springtime for Hitler as part of a musical comedy sequence. The role of Lily von Shtupp allowed Madeline to showcase everything she had learned in her years of training as a singer and an actress. She performed the number with absolute commitment, with exaggerated mannerisms, with a perfect accent, with a vocal performance that was both comic and musically accomplished. She made the audience hysterical with laughter, but she also demonstrated serious vocal talent. It was a performance that showed she was capable of anything, that she could handle comedy, musical theater, dramatic acting, all at the highest level. For her performance in Blazing Saddles, Madeline was nominated for a second Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. She did not win this one either, but Premiere Magazine years later would rank her performance as Lily von Shtupp number 31 on a list of the 100 greatest performances of all time. That is the kind of critical respect that most actors never receive. That is the kind of performance that lives on in popular culture, that is remembered decades later, that defines a career. Also in 1974, Madeline appeared in Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein, a black and white parody of the 1931 Frankenstein film. In Young Frankenstein, Madeline played Elizabeth, the fiancée of Gene Wilder's Dr. Frankenstein. She had one of the most famous scenes in the film, in which she responds to a moment of sexual ecstasy by launching into an operatic rendition of Sweet Mystery of Life. It is a scene that has been analyzed and discussed extensively by film critics, some calling it sexist, others calling it hilarious, everyone agreeing that is absolutely unforgettable. Madeline's commitment to the bit, her willingness to fully inhabit the character, her operatic vocal performance, all of it came together to create one of the most iconic moments in comedy film history. For her performance in Young Frankenstein, Madeline received another Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. That is 3 Academy Award nominations in 2 years. That is the kind of career trajectory that most actors spend their entire lives dreaming about. Madeline Kahn had gone from being essentially unknown in 1970 to being one of the most nominated actresses in Hollywood by 1974. She was 32 years old. She was finally getting the recognition that her talent deserved. But success for Madeline came with a complicated mix of joy and confusion. Chapter 6, The Peak Years, the mid-1970 OS, and The Working Actress. The mid-1970s were the best years of Madeline Kahn's career. She was 32, 33, 34 years old, and she was at the height of her powers as a performer. She was beautiful in a distinctive way. She had the kind of presence that made audiences want to watch her on screen. And she had talent, genuine, undeniable, world-class talent. In 1975, she appeared in The Adventure of Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother, written by and starring Gene Wilder, and directed by Gene Wilder in his directorial debut. In this film, Madeline played Jenny, a music hall singer and woman of mystery. Again, she was not the lead, but she was a significant supporting player in an important film. And again, she was wonderful. She brought energy and comedy and a certain kind of mysterious sexuality to the role. The film was not as successful as Blazing Saddles or Young Frankenstein, but Madeline's performance was praised. She also appeared in other films during this period. She was in At Long Last Love, another film directed by Peter Bogdanovich, this one a musical comedy featuring Cole Porter songs. She was in The Muppet Movie, lending her voice and talent to a puppet adventure film that would become beloved by audiences. She was in High Anxiety, another Mel Brooks film, directed by and starring Mel Brooks himself, a parody of Alfred Hitchcock films. In High Anxiety, Madeline played Victoria Brisbane, the female lead opposite Mel Brooks. During this same period, Madeline continued to return to the stage, even as her film career was taking off. She appeared in a Broadway revival of She Loves Me in 1977. This was important to her. Despite the success she was having in films, she loved the theater. She loved the immediacy of performing in front of a live audience. She loved the challenge of having to maintain a performance night after night. She was a creature of the stage, and even as Hollywood was becoming her primary venue, she was determined not to abandon the theater completely. In 1978, she took on one of her most significant stage roles, playing Lily Garland in On the 20th Century, the comic musical with music by Cy Coleman and lyrics by Betty Comden and Adolph Green. Lily Garland is a glamorous, demanding, neurotic actress, and it was a role perfectly suited to Madeline's talents. The show had a successful run on Broadway, and Madeline was at the center of it. But then reportedly she was fired from the show early in its run. The exact circumstances are unclear, but for Madeline, being fired from a show was humiliating. It was a professional rejection, the kind of thing that echoed back to her childhood, to all those auditions she did not get, all those parts she was written out of before the show reached Broadway. Chapter 7. The Decline, the Difficult 198 OS. The late 1970s and the 1980s were a difficult period for Madeline's career. The roles began to dry up. Mel Brooks was no longer making films. Peter Bogdanovich was no longer in his creative prime. The kinds of films that Madeline was suited for were becoming less popular. Comedy was changing. Audiences were interested in different kinds of humor. The screwball comedies and musical parodies that had made Madeline a star in the early and mid-1970s were falling out of favor. The films she appeared in during the 1980s were largely forgettable. In 1982, she appeared in Slapstick of Another Kind, a Jerry Lewis science fiction comedy that was widely considered a disaster. In 1983, she appeared in Yellowbeard, a pirate comedy that was also poorly received. In 1984, she played a love interest opposite Burt Reynolds in the crime comedy City Heat. In 1985, she played Mrs. White in Clue, the murder mystery comedy based on the board game. Clue would become something of a cult favorite, but at the time of its release, it was not considered a major success. In 1983 and 1984, Madeline starred in her own television sitcom called Oh, Madeline. In the show, she played Madeline Wayne, a bored housewife whose attempts to spice up her life led to frequent slapstick moments. The show was not well received. It had poor ratings. It was canceled after one season. This was a humiliation for Madeline. She had been offered her own show, a chance to be a television star, and the show had failed. It suggested that audiences were not interested in watching her in dramatic television roles, that her talents were better suited to supporting roles in films or to theater. Another television show she appeared in, Mr. President, also failed. It ran for only one season. She was cast as the sister of George C. Scott's commander-in-chief, a character who assumes the role of First Lady when the president's wife leaves. Again, the show did not work. Again, Madeline found herself in the position of having tried something and having it fail publicly. These failures took a toll on Madeline psychologically. She was in her 40s now, no longer young by Hollywood standards. The parts for women her age were limited. The industry had made it clear that there was only so much use for an actress once she had aged beyond a certain point. Madeline had always been somewhat insecure, somewhat doubtful of her own talents. These professional failures reinforced her insecurities. She began to doubt whether she was really talented, whether the success she had had in the 1970s had been a fluke, whether she really deserved a place in the entertainment industry. In 1987, she did score a personal triumph with her appearance on an ABC after-school special, a television movie for young people. In the special, she played a lonely divorced mother whose son submits a personal ad in an attempt to find her the perfect mate. The special was well received, and Madeline's performance was praised. She won a Daytime Emmy Award for the role. It was validation, proof that she still had talent, that she could still deliver excellent performances. But it was also a role on a television special aimed at young people, not a major film role, not a starring role in a prestigious production. Chapter 8. The return to Broadway, the sisters Rosenzweig and Redemption, in the late 1980s and early 1990s. As her film career continued to decline, Madeline found her way back to the stage. And it was on the stage that she would find redemption, that she would prove that she was still a major talent, that she would receive the kind of recognition that had eluded her in the 1980s. In 1989, she appeared in a Broadway revival of Born Yesterday, Garson Kanon's classic comedy about a junk dealer's mistress who falls in love with an idealistic journalist. Madeline played Billy Dawn, the female lead, a role that required her to be funny, vulnerable, and ultimately triumphant. She received another Tony Award nomination for this role, her third nomination. The role was a success, and it proved that Madeline could still command a Broadway stage. But it was in 1993 that Madeline achieved true vindication. She was cast in Wendy Wasserstein's play The Sisters Rosenzweig, playing gorgeous Teitelbaum, an affluent, sophisticated woman from Miami. The character could have easily devolved into a stereotypical caricature of an affluent Jewish woman, but Madeline played the role with nuance and depth. She was funny, yes, but she was also vulnerable and human. She brought tremendous warmth to the character. She showed that she understood the complexity beneath the superficial glamour. For her performance in The Sisters Rosenzweig, Madeline won the Tony Award for Best Actress in a Play. This was not a nomination. This was an actual win. This was the kind of recognition that every actor dreams of. She had finally won a Tony Award at the age of 50 after more than 20 years of professional theater work. The award was validation of her talent, proof that despite the failures of the 1980s, despite the fact that she had never quite achieved movie stardom in the way that some of her contemporaries had, she was a serious, talented actress worthy of the highest accolades. After winning the Tony Award for The Sisters Rosenzweig, Madeline continued to work in theater. She performed in concert productions. She appeared in various theatrical productions. She had found her home again on the stage, in the theater, where audiences could see her live and immediate and real. Chapter 9. The Television Years, The Cosby Show, and Final Performances. In the mid-1990s, Madeline had a significant role in the television series Cosby, the sitcom starring Bill Cosby that ran from 1996 to 2000. In the show, she played Pauline, the best friend of Felicia Rashad's character. It was a role that ran for 3 seasons, from 1996 to 1999, and it provided her with steady, meaningful work. She was not the lead, but she was a significant supporting player in a successful television show. For an actress in her 50s, this was meaningful work. The kind of work that kept her active and involved in the entertainment industry. During the same period, in 1998, Madeline also lent her voice to the animated film A Bug's Life, Pixar's computer animated comedy about ants and grasshoppers. She voiced Gypsy the Moth, a circus performer ant. It was not a major role, but it was a professional voice acting role in a major Hollywood film. A Bug's Life would become one of the most successful films of 1998, and it introduced Madeline's voice to a new generation of young audiences. In 1998, Madeline participated in a workshop reading of Dear World at the Roundabout Theater Company in New York. It was a return to the theater, a return to the kind of work that she loved. She was also working on voicing a character in the children's television show Little Bill. She voiced Mrs. Shapiro in the first 2 episodes of the series. Despite her age, despite the fact that she was no longer a young woman being pursued by major studios and major directors, Madeline was still working, still active, still involved in the entertainment industry. In 1999, her last film was released. It was called Judy Berlin, an independent film that received limited theatrical release. Despite the limited distribution, the film received good reviews, and Madeline's performance was particularly praised. Critics noted that she brought a kind of wisdom and understanding to her role. the kind of thing that comes from having lived a long and complicated life. It was a quiet, understated performance, completely different from the broad comedic performances that had made her famous in the 1970s, but it was a beautiful performance nonetheless. It suggested that Madeline, as she aged, was becoming a deeper and more nuanced performer. Chapter 10: The Diagnosis, Cancer, and the Final Days. In September 1998, Madeline Kahn was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. She did not announce the diagnosis publicly until November 1999. She kept the diagnosis secret, telling very few people. She continued to work on the Cosby television show. She continued to appear in films. She continued to perform, even as she was dealing with the knowledge that she had a serious, life-threatening illness. Ovarian cancer is a particularly insidious disease. It often goes undetected until it has reached an advanced stage. By the time it is discovered, it has often already spread. This was the case with Madeline's cancer. The cancer was advanced when it was diagnosed. She underwent treatment, chemotherapy, the standard cancer protocols, but the disease was aggressive. She was 57 years old. She had so much more to give, so many more performances to deliver, so many more audiences to make laugh. But in October 1999, just weeks before her death, Madeline made the decision to marry her longtime companion, John Hansbury, an attorney who had been in her life for some time. They had a small, quiet ceremony. The marriage was partly practical, a way to protect her pension and her estate in case of her death. But it was also romantic, a final declaration of love and commitment. After all those years of being alone, of keeping her personal life private, of being wary of relationships, Madeline finally married. She married the man who had stood by her, and then 2 months later, she was gone. On December 3rd, 1999, at age 57, Madeline Kahn died of ovarian cancer. She was cremated on December 6th at Garden State Crematory in North Bergen, New Jersey. The entertainment community mourned her passing, but it was a quiet mourning. She had never been a huge celebrity, never been the kind of star whose death made international headlines. She was a respected performer, a beloved figure in theater and film circles, but not a household name. The general public did not know who she was. The general public did not mourn her passing. Her husband John and her brother Jeffrey arranged for a bench to be erected in Central Park in her memory. It is a small memorial to a woman who gave so much to her art and who received so little recognition in return. The bench sits in Central Park, a place where people sit and rest and enjoy the beauty of New York City, and they have no idea that it is dedicated to one of the greatest comedic actresses of the 20th century. Chapter 11: The Talent, What Made Her Special. What made Madeline Kahn such an exceptional performer? What was the quality that made audiences laugh, that made critics take notice, that made her performances so distinctive and memorable? The answer is complicated, multifaceted, involving both technical skill and something more ineffable that cannot be easily defined. First, there was her voice. The voice that a teacher had told her would handicap her career became one of her greatest assets. Her distinctive inflection, her particular way of pronouncing words, her baby talk quality, all of this made her voice immediately recognizable. When she spoke, audiences knew it was her. She could do different accents, she could change the quality of her voice, but there was always something essentially Madeline about the way she sounded. This distinctiveness meant that she was never confused with another actress, never relegated to being the interchangeable pretty girl. She was unforgettable, but it was not just her voice, it was what she did with her voice. She was a trained opera singer. She had studied voice seriously. She had learned how to breathe, how to project, how to control her vocal cords to produce exactly the sound she wanted. This training meant that even when she was performing comedy, even when she was being deliberately silly, there was a musical intelligence behind what she was doing. She was not just making fun of opera or musical theater. She was performing opera, delivering genuinely impressive vocal performances while simultaneously making the audience laugh. Second, there was her physical comedy. Despite her relatively small frame, Madeline had an incredible physical presence on screen and on stage. She could do slapstick, she could move in funny ways, she could use her body to create humor, but she was not overdoing it. She was not falling over or making exaggerated movements. She was subtle, she was precise. She understood that the best physical comedy is not about big, obvious movements, but about small, precise gestures that communicate character and emotion. Third, there was her intelligence. Madeline understood the material she was performing. She understood the character she was playing. She understood the joke. She understood what made something funny. She was not just executing the lines that were written for her. She was understanding the intention behind the lines, and she was delivering them in a way that brought out the maximum humor while also maintaining the integrity of the character. Fourth, there was her vulnerability. Madeline was a shy, insecure person in real life. This vulnerability came through in her performances. Even when she was playing a broad, comedic character, there was always a depth to her work, a sense that there was something more going on beneath the surface. She brought humanity to her characters. She made them sympathetic. She made audiences care about them, even when those characters were meant to be ridiculous or absurd. Finally, there was her commitment. Madeline was not a star who phoned in her performances or treated her work as a job. She was committed to excellence. She prepared thoroughly. She understood her craft. She took her work seriously, even when she was performing in what was ostensibly a silly comedy. This commitment to excellence was evident in every performance, and it was one of the reasons that she was so respected by her peers. Chapter 12. The mother, the complicated relationship that defined her life. Throughout Madeline's life, her relationship with her mother Paula was complicated, difficult, and deeply damaging. Paula was a selfish woman, a woman whose own dreams and desires always took precedence over her daughter's well-being. She had abandoned Madeline to boarding school. She had manipulated her. She had relied on her for money. She had expected Madeline to finance her theatrical dreams, even though those dreams had never come to anything. As Madeline became successful, as she began to make money as an actress, Paula increasingly relied on her for financial support. There are stories of Paula including bills with birthday cards sent to her daughter. There are stories of Madeline financing her mother's failed theatrical ventures. There are stories of Paula expecting Madeline to be available to her at all times, to drop everything for her mother's needs and desires. This relationship created a kind of emotional residue in Madeline that never quite went away. She was always wary of people's motives. She was always suspicious that people wanted something from her. She struggled to maintain healthy relationships. She kept her personal life private, away from the scrutiny of the media and the public. She was lonely in many ways because the person who should have taught her how to love unconditionally, her mother, had instead taught her that love was conditional, that it was tied to usefulness, that it was something to be suspicious of. The tragedy of Madeline's life is that despite all of her talent, despite all of her success, she never fully escaped the damage that her mother had done to her. She never fully healed from the abandonment of her father and the manipulation of her mother. She never fully believed in her own worth. And ultimately, this lack of self-belief made her vulnerable to the industry that she was working in, an industry that was designed to extract value from performers and then discard them. Chapter 13. The Legacy: What Remains After She Is Gone. Madeline Kahn died more than 25 years ago, and yet her legacy remains. Her films are still watched. Her performances are still studied by acting teachers and film students. The bench in Central Park bears her name. But beyond these material things, what is her real legacy? Her legacy is that she proved that a woman could be funny without being conventionally beautiful. She proved that you could be talented in multiple ways: a brilliant comedic actress, a serious dramatic actress, an accomplished opera singer, a skilled theater performer. She proved that you could maintain your integrity and your craft even in an industry designed to exploit you. She proved that being shy and insecure did not mean you could not be a great performer. If anything, her insecurity made her performances richer, deeper, more human. Her legacy is that she made people laugh. For more than 40 years, she made audiences laugh. She made people happy. She brought joy into the world through her performances. That is not a small thing. That is not something to be dismissed or minimized. Making people laugh, bringing joy to people's lives, is one of the most valuable contributions a person can make to the world. Her legacy is also one of caution and sadness. She is a reminder of how the entertainment industry can be brutal to those who work in it. She is a reminder that success does not guarantee happiness, that recognition does not heal old wounds, that even the most talented people can struggle with self-doubt and insecurity. She is a reminder that we need to take better care of the artists who give so much to us. Chapter 14. The films that defined her career. If you want to understand Madeline Kahn's talent, you need to watch 4 films. These are the films that showcase what made her special, that demonstrate why she was so beloved by those who knew her work. First, there is Paper Moon, 1973. This is a film in which Madeline played a supporting role, but her performance is indelible. She brought humor and pathos to Trixie Delight, making the character more than just a one-dimensional comic figure. This film earned her the first of 4 Academy Award nominations. Second, there is Blazing Saddles, 1974. Her performance as Lily von Stupp is iconic. She sang, she acted, she demonstrated vocal and comic mastery. This is the performance that most people remember, the role that defined her career. It is impossible to watch this film without being amazed by her talent. Third, there is Young Frankenstein, 1974. The sweet mystery of life scene is legendary. Her commitment to the absurdity of the moment, her willingness to deliver a full operatic performance while the audience is laughing hysterically, demonstrates her mastery of tone and her understanding of how to blend comedy with genuine artistic achievement. Fourth, there is The Sisters Rosenzweig, 1993. This is a film version of the stage play, and it allows you to see her in a more dramatic role, a role in which she is playing a character with real emotional depth and complexity. This performance earned her the first of what should have been many major awards. It is a beautiful, nuanced performance from an actress who had matured over her lifetime and who understood her craft at the deepest level. If you watch these 4 films, you will understand Madeline Kahn. You will understand why she was so beloved by her peers, why directors wanted to work with her, why audiences responded to her so enthusiastically. Chapter 15. The Question of Fame, Why Nobody Remembers Her. One of the mysteries of Madeline Kahn's career is why she never became a major movie star, why her name is not as well known as some of her contemporaries, why she has essentially faded from public memory in the 25 years since her death. The answer is complicated and involves both circumstances beyond her control and her own choices and personality. First, timing mattered. Madeline's best film roles were in the mid-1970s, a period that now seems distant and almost quaint. The kinds of films she made, the screwball comedies and musical parodies, became less popular in the 1980s and 1990s. The entertainment industry moved on. New actresses emerged. The world changed. Madeline did not age out of the industry because she was no longer talented, but because the industry was no longer interested in the kind of work she was doing. Second, Madeline did not cultivate a public persona. She did not promote herself. She did not court the media or the gossip columnists. She kept her personal life private. She refused to play the game of celebrity. This integrity, this refusal to turn herself into a brand, meant that she was not as visible in the public consciousness as some of her contemporaries who were willing to trade their privacy for publicity. Third, Madeline was a character actress, not a leading lady. She was not the kind of actress who is cast as the romantic lead, as the beautiful woman who men fell in love with. She was the supporting player, the friend, the comic relief. This type of role, while allowing her to be brilliant and memorable, does not typically lead to the kind of fame that makes you a household name. Leading ladies become more famous than character actresses. It is the nature of the industry. Fourth, Madeline's career declined in the 1980s, during a time when she was no longer young. The parts for women her age became more limited. The industry had less use for her. While she continued to work, particularly in theater, her film career essentially ended. By the time she returned to a level of prominence with the sisters Rosenzweig in 1993, she was already 50 years old. Most people did not know who she was. The window for becoming a major star had closed. Chapter 16. The Impact. How she influenced comedy. Despite being relatively unknown to the general public, Madeline Kahn had a significant impact on comedy and on how female comedic performers were perceived in the entertainment industry. She proved that a woman could be a serious comic performer, not just a pretty supporting actress meant to look attractive and attract male attention. She proved that comedy required as much skill and dedication as dramatic acting. She had trained extensively as an opera singer and was a skilled musical performer. She had studied acting seriously. She was a professional craftsperson, and she approached comedy with the same rigor that a dramatic actress would approach a Chekhov play. She influenced how other comedic actresses approached their work. Actresses who came after her saw that you could be distinctive, that you could have a particular comic sensibility, that you could bring depth and nuance to comedic roles. You did not have to be a traditional beauty. You did not have to conform to industry standards of what a leading lady should be. You could be yourself, and that self could be enough. She also demonstrated the power of commitment and preparation. She understood her characters deeply. She understood the material. She was not improvising. She was executing a carefully crafted performance that brought out maximum humor while maintaining the integrity of the character. This approach to comedy influenced how other performers approached their work. Chapter 17. The Personal Life, the Woman Behind the Performance. Despite her extensive professional career, Madeline kept her personal life largely private. She never had children. She had relationships, but most of them were not made public. She was a woman who maintained strict boundaries between her public and private self. According to those who knew her, Madeline was quite different from her public persona. While she was willing to be outrageous and broad in her comedic performances, in her real life she was shy, reserved, careful. She was not the kind of person who made friends easily. She was wary of people's motives. She preferred small gatherings to large parties. She was more comfortable one-on-one than in large social situations. She loved New York City. Despite her years of working in Hollywood, she always considered New York to be her real home. She spent as much time there as she could. She appeared in Broadway shows whenever possible. She was a creature of the theater, and the theater world was her true community. She was also a woman who struggled with self-doubt and insecurity throughout her life. Despite all of her success, despite all of the praise and recognition she received, she never fully believed in her own talent. She was constantly questioning whether she was good enough, whether she deserved the roles she was given, whether audiences really liked her or if they were just being polite. Chapter 18. The Final Word. Why her story matters. Madeline Kahn's story is important because it is a story about talent and dedication and the pursuit of excellence in an industry designed to chew people up and spit them out. It is a story about a woman who came from a broken home, who was abandoned by her father, who was manipulated, and neglected by her mother, and who despite all of this managed to become a great artist. Her story is also a cautionary tale. It is a reminder that success and recognition do not heal psychological wounds. It is a reminder that the entertainment industry is brutal and often unrewarding, even to those who achieve real success. It is a reminder that we need to take better care of artists, that we need to support them not just when they are young and beautiful and marketable, but throughout their careers and their lives. Her story is a celebration of a woman who did what she loved, who pursued her craft with dedication and professionalism, who gave everything she had to her art. It is a celebration of someone who made the world a happier place through her performances. It is a celebration of a woman who deserves to be remembered, even if she has largely been forgotten. Madeline Kahn died on December 3rd, 1999, at age 57. She was cremated, and a bench was placed in Central Park in her memory. Most people have never heard of her. Most people would not recognize her name. Most people do not know who she was or what she did. But if you ever see that bench in Central Park, if you ever read her name, if you ever watch one of her films, you should know that it was dedicated to a woman who is one of the most talented performers of her generation. You should know that she brought joy and laughter to millions of people. You should know that she deserved better than the way she was treated by the entertainment industry and by history. This is the story of Madeline Kahn. This is why she matters. This is why we should remember her.